I thought I found the perfect man for me and my son. Then he suggested I give my child away to his sister. Now he's begging for another chance, but I've moved on in an unexpected way. I'm Sarah, 28F, and I have a 5-year-old son named Ethan from a previous relationship. My journey to motherhood wasn't exactly conventional. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business. My parents, both teachers, had high expectations for me. I was always the good girl, straight A's, captain of the debate team, and volunteer at the local animal shelter. When I got accepted to a prestigious university on a partial scholarship, it felt like my life was on track. During my sophomore year, I met Paul at a campus party. He was charming, rebellious, and everything my parents would disapprove of. Our relationship was intense and passionate. Paul introduced me to a world of excitement I'd never known before. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alive. Fast forward to my senior year. I was juggling a heavy course load, an internship, and my relationship with Paul. That's when I found out I was pregnant. The timing couldn't have been worse. I was months away from graduating, and Paul and I had been going through a rough patch. When I told Paul about the pregnancy, his reaction was not what I had hoped for. He panicked, saying he wasn't ready to be a father and suggested I take care of it. I was shocked and hurt. Despite the challenges, I knew in my heart that I wanted to keep the baby. My parents were initially disappointed, but they rallied around me. Paul, on the other hand, became distant. A week before graduation, he told me he couldn't handle the responsibility and ended our relationship. I was heartbroken but determined to make it work as a single mom. Ethan was born in the winter after I graduated. The first year was tough. I moved back in with my parents, worked part-time at a local bookstore, and applied for entry-level positions in my field. There were nights I cried from exhaustion and doubt, but one look at Ethan's face would remind me why it was all worth it. Eventually, I landed a job at a marketing firm in the city. My parents helped me find a small apartment nearby, and I started building a life for Ethan and me. It wasn't easy, but we made it work. Ethan grew into a bright, curious little boy who loved dinosaurs and could spend hours building elaborate Lego structures. 2 years ago, my college friend Megan insisted I join her for a night out. She said I needed to remember I was more than just a mom. Reluctantly, I agreed. That's how I met Mark, 32M. He was Megan's coworker, recently transferred from another branch. Mark was kind, stable, and had a great sense of humor. We hit it off immediately. When I told Mark about Ethan on our second date, I braced myself for the usual reaction, a polite smile followed by a gradual ghosting. But Mark surprised me. He asked to see pictures and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about Ethan. Our relationship progressed slowly. Mark was patient and understanding about my priorities as a mom. He'd come over for movie nights with Ethan and me, bring soup when one of us was sick, and even volunteered to babysit once when I had a work emergency. For the first time since becoming a mom, I felt like I could have it all: a career, a loving partner, and a happy child. After dating for 6 months, Mark suggested we move in together. I was hesitant at first, worried about how it would affect Ethan. But Mark had become such a positive presence in our lives that it felt like a natural next step. We found a lovely 3-bedroom apartment, and Ethan was thrilled to have a bigger room for all his toys. Life seemed perfect. Mark and Ethan bonded over their shared love of sci-fi movies and pizza-making experiments in the kitchen. I'd often come home from work to find them engrossed in a game of make-believe, with Ethan directing Mark in elaborate space adventures. Last week, Mark proposed during a romantic dinner at home after Ethan had gone to bed. I was overjoyed and said yes without hesitation. As we basked in the glow of our engagement, we started discussing our future together, including the possibility of having more children. That's when things took an unexpected turn. Mark brought up the idea of adopting Ethan. At first, I thought he meant he wanted to be Ethan's legal father, which I was open to discussing. But then he clarified that he wanted his childless sister, Anna, 36F, to adopt Ethan. I was stunned into silence. Mark explained that Anna and her husband had been struggling with infertility for years, and it was putting a strain on their marriage. He thought that by letting Anna adopt Ethan, we could help her and start our own family without the complications of my past. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the man who had played dinosaur tea parties with Ethan, who had patiently taught him how to tie his shoelaces, who had been there for every scraped knee and bad dream for the past year and a half. How could he suddenly see Ethan as something to be given away? I told Mark that Ethan wasn't a complication, and that I would never give up my son. Mark seemed genuinely surprised by my reaction. He said he thought I'd be relieved to have a fresh start, to focus on our new life together without the burden of single motherhood. We got into a heated argument. Mark insisted that it would be best for everyone involved. Anna would get to be a mother, Ethan would have a stable 2-parent home, and we could focus on building our own family. I was furious that he could even suggest such a thing. I reminded Mark of all the moments we'd shared with Ethan, of how he'd always said he loved being a part of our little family. I asked him if it had all been a lie, if he'd been planning this all along. Mark denied this, saying he really did care for Ethan but thought this would be the best solution for everyone. The argument escalated. Mark accused me of being selfish and not considering what was best for Ethan. He said that Anna and her husband could provide more stability and opportunities for Ethan than I could as a single mom. His words cut deep, bringing back all the insecurities I'd fought so hard to overcome. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, I realized I couldn't stay there. I went to Ethan's room, gently woke him up, and told him we were going on a surprise sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's house. As I packed a few essentials, Mark followed me around, alternating between apologies and attempts to convince me to reconsider. I left the apartment with Ethan, my hands shaking as I buckled him into his car seat. As we drove to my parents' house, Ethan sleepily asked why we were leaving in the middle of the night. I struggled to find an answer that wouldn't scare or confuse him. Now, I'm at my parents' house, trying to make sense of everything. Mark is blowing up my phone with messages, alternating between apologizing and trying to convince me that his idea is for the best. His family, especially Anna, are also reaching out and pressuring me to reconsider. I love Mark, or at least I thought I did. But I can't imagine being with someone who sees my son as an obstacle to our happiness. Am I overreacting? Should I hear them out? I feel like I'm going crazy with all this pressure. I keep replaying our relationship in my mind, wondering if there were signs I missed. Was Mark just pretending to care about Ethan all this time? Or did he genuinely believe this would be best for everyone? I'm torn between my feelings for Mark and my instinct to protect my son at all costs. Ethan is confused and keeps asking when we're going home. He misses his toys, his room, and yes, he misses Mark. It breaks my heart to see him sad, but I don't know how to explain the situation to a 5-year-old. My parents are supportive but concerned. They never fully trusted Mark, saying our relationship moved too fast. Now I wonder if they were right all along. I'm scared about the future. The life I thought I was building has crumbled overnight. Can I trust my judgment again? How do I protect Ethan from the fallout of this situation? AETA for refusing to even consider letting Mark's sister adopt my son? Am I denying Ethan a better life out of my own selfishness? Or am I right to trust my instincts and keep my family together? Edit. Thank you all for your responses. I'm overwhelmed by the support and advice. To clarify a few things, Ethan's biological father, Paul, has never been involved in his life and legally terminated his parental rights when Ethan was a baby. I have a stable job in marketing and can provide for Ethan on my own. We're not struggling financially. Mark knew from the beginning that Ethan was a package deal with me. He never expressed any issues with this until now. I'll post an update when I've had a chance to process everything and decide on my next steps. Update 1. It's been a week since my last post, and I feel like I've aged years in just 7 days. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Your words have been a lifeline during this chaotic time. After taking a few days to calm down and gather my thoughts, I agreed to meet with Mark to talk things through. We decided to meet at a neutral location, a local park where Ethan and I often go for picnics. I asked my best friend Lisa to come along for support. She's been my rock through this whole ordeal, offering a shoulder to cry on and stepping in to watch Ethan when I needed time to think. When I saw Mark approach, my heart did a painful flip. He looked tired and disheveled, a far cry from his usual put-together appearance. For a moment, I felt a pang of concern, but I quickly reminded myself why we were here. Mark started by apologizing profusely. He said he'd spent the past week reflecting on his actions and realized how insensitive and hurtful his suggestion had been. He tried to explain that he'd gotten caught up in trying to help his sister and hadn't fully thought through the implications of what he was asking. I listened quietly, letting him speak. When he finished, I took a deep breath and told him how betrayed I felt. I explained that Ethan isn't just some accessory in my life. He's my son, my world. I've built my entire life around giving him the best future possible. The idea that Mark could see him as something to be given away was incomprehensible to me. I also expressed how hurt I was that he seemed to view Ethan as an obstacle to our happiness rather than a part of our family. I reminded him of all the moments we'd shared, the family movie nights, the trips to the zoo, the time Mark stayed up all night helping Ethan finish his science project. How could he go from that to suggesting we give Ethan away? Mark listened, and to his credit, he seemed genuinely remorseful. He admitted that he had some underlying anxieties about becoming a stepfather that he hadn't addressed. He said he loves Ethan, but was scared about the responsibility of raising someone else's child. He worried about making mistakes or not measuring up to the role of a father. We talked for hours, diving into our fears, expectations, and hopes for our relationship. Mark shared that he'd grown up in a blended family and had always felt like an outsider with his stepfather. He was afraid of making Ethan feel the same way. I opened up about my own insecurities as a single mother and my fear of letting someone else into the little world Ethan and I had built. It was an emotional conversation, but I felt like we were finally being honest with each other. For a brief moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could work through this. However, just as I was starting to feel a bit more optimistic, Mark dropped another bombshell. He confessed that his sister, Anna, knew about his plan to suggest the adoption. In fact, she had been the one to initially bring up the idea. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not only had Mark betrayed my trust, but his entire family had been planning behind my back to take my son. I was catapulted back to that night in college when Paul told me he couldn't handle being a father. Once again, I felt alone and betrayed by someone I thought I could trust. Mark begged me to understand, saying that Anna was desperate and that they all thought it would be a win-win situation. He said they never meant to hurt me, and that they genuinely thought I might be open to the idea. I couldn't take it anymore. The park suddenly felt too small, too exposed. I told Mark that I needed space and time to think. I made it clear that his sister's desire for a child doesn't trump my right to raise my own son. I also told him that I wasn't sure if I could ever trust him or his family again. As I was leaving, Mark asked if this meant we were over. I honestly didn't know how to answer. Part of me still loves him, still wants to believe in the life we were building together. But another part feels like this betrayal is too big to overcome. How can I ever look at him the same way, knowing he was willing to give away my child? For now, I'm focusing on Ethan. He's noticed that something is wrong and keeps asking about Mark. It breaks my heart to see him confused and upset. I've tried to explain in simple terms that Mark and I are having a disagreement, but it's hard to shield him from the tension. I've been throwing myself into work and spending every free moment with Ethan. We've been having movie marathons, building pillow forts, and baking cookies. Anything to keep his mind off the situation and reassure him that he's loved and secure. My parents have been incredibly supportive. They've offered to let us stay as long as we need, and my mom has been helping with Ethan when I need some time to myself. I'm grateful for their support, but I also feel a sense of failure. I thought I had finally figured everything out, and now I'm back in my childhood bedroom, feeling lost and uncertain. I'm not sure what the future holds for us. I'm considering individual counseling to help me process everything. As for Mark and me, I don't know if couples counseling would help or if it's even worth trying to salvage this relationship. The thought of starting over is terrifying. I had allowed myself to envision a future with Mark. More siblings for Ethan, family vacations, a house with a backyard. Now all of that seems like a distant dream. But then I look at Ethan, with his mop of curly hair and his gap-toothed smile, and I know that no matter what happens, we'll be okay. He's my anchor, my reason for pushing forward. I'll update again when I've made a decision about our future. For now, I'm just taking it one day at a time and trying to be the best mom I can be for Ethan. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I've finally come to a decision about my relationship with Mark. The past few weeks have been a roller coaster of emotions, filled with sleepless nights and long, introspective days. After our last meeting, I took some time to really think about everything that had happened. I replayed our entire relationship in my mind, from our first meeting to the night of his proposal. I tried to pinpoint any red flags I might have missed, any hints that Mark wasn't as invested in our little family as I thought he was. During this time, Mark continued to reach out. He sent messages, emails, and even handwritten letters. Each one was filled with apologies and pleas for another chance. He said he realized how wrong he was and that he wanted to make things right. He talked about how much he missed Ethan and me, how empty the apartment felt without us. I was torn. On one hand, I still had feelings for Mark. I missed the way he'd make me laugh after a long day at work, the way he'd dance with Ethan in the kitchen while making pancakes on Saturday mornings. A part of me wanted to believe that we could work through this, that it was just a momentary lapse in judgment on his part. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Every time I'd start to soften, I'd remember the look on his face when he suggested giving Ethan away, as if my son was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. I'd think about how his entire family had been in on this plan, discussing my son's future as if they had any right to decide it. I had long talks with my parents and close friends, seeking their perspectives. My mom, always the pragmatist, pointed out that trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. My dad, who had been skeptical of Mark from the start, simply said, "You and Ethan deserve someone who sees you both as blessings, not burdens." Lisa, my best friend, reminded me of all the times I'd put my own needs aside for others. She said it was time I put myself and Ethan first, regardless of what anyone else thought. What really helped me make my decision was a conversation I had with Ethan. He asked me why Mark wasn't coming around anymore, and I tried to explain in a way he could understand. I told him that Mark had made a mistake that hurt Mommy's feelings, and we needed some time apart. Ethan looked at me with his big brown eyes and said, "But Mommy, if he said sorry, can't you forgive him? You always tell me to forgive when someone says sorry." His innocent words hit me hard. I realized that while forgiveness is important, it doesn't always mean going back to the way things were. I needed to set an example for Ethan about self-respect and healthy boundaries. So, I decided to meet with Mark one last time. We met at a coffee shop near my office. As soon as I saw him, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, and a lingering affection that made this all the more difficult. I told him my decision. I explained that while I appreciated his apologies, I couldn't continue our relationship. The trust was broken, and I couldn't risk putting Ethan through any more upheaval. I told him that Ethan deserved stability and unconditional love, and I wasn't convinced he could provide that anymore. Mark was upset, but said he understood. He asked if there was any chance we could try again in the future, but I told him I didn't think so. I returned the engagement ring and wished him well. As for Anna and Mark's family, I sent them a polite but firm message asking them to respect my decision and not contact me about adopting Ethan again. I made it clear that any further attempts to pressure me would result in me cutting off all contact. It's been hard, especially explaining to Ethan why Mark won't be around anymore. There have been nights when he's cried for Mark, and it breaks my heart. But I know I made the right choice for both of us. We're adjusting to our new normal, and I'm focusing on building a happy, stable life for Ethan and me. I've moved out of my parents' house and found a small apartment closer to Ethan's school. It's cozy and just big enough for the two of us. Ethan loves that he gets to decorate his new room however he wants. We spent a weekend painting it blue and putting up glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. I'm not ready to date again, and honestly, I'm not sure when I will be. For now, I'm content being Ethan's mom and rediscovering who I am as an individual, not just someone's girlfriend or fiancé. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and kind words have meant more than you know. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have been going for Ethan and me. The first few months after breaking up with Mark were tough. Ethan had a hard time understanding why Mark wasn't around anymore, and there were many nights of tears and questions. I did my best to explain things in a way he could understand, always emphasizing that it wasn't his fault and that he was loved. I'm proud to say that Ethan has shown incredible resilience. He's adjusted well to our new apartment and is thriving in kindergarten. His teacher recently told me that he's one of the most empathetic kids in the class, always quick to comfort a classmate who's feeling sad. It made me realize that despite all the upheaval, I must be doing something right. We've established new routines and traditions, just the two of us. Every Friday night is now adventure night, where we try something new. Whether it's cooking a dish from a different country, learning a magic trick, or building a cardboard fortress in the living room. These little moments of joy and connection have been healing for both of us. As for me, I've been focusing on personal growth. I started taking evening classes to advance my career, joined a single parent support group, and even picked up a new hobby: pottery. It's been therapeutic to create something with my hands and watch it take shape. Ethan loves visiting the studio with me and making little pinch pots that now decorate our windowsills. I ran into Mark at the grocery store last week. It was awkward at first, but we managed to have a civil conversation. He started seeing someone new, and I genuinely wished him well. I was surprised to find that I felt no regret or longing, just a sense of closure. Anna, Mark's sister, sent me an email apologizing for her role in the adoption scheme. She said she realized how selfish and inappropriate their actions were. While I appreciated her apology, I made it clear that I'm not interested in maintaining any kind of relationship with her or Mark's family. The most unexpected development has been reconnecting with an old friend from college, Jason. We bumped into each other at a local festival, and he was there with his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. We got to talking and realized we had a lot in common as single parents. We've been meeting up for playdates with our kids and enjoying each other's company. It's not romantic at this point, but it's nice to have a friend who understands the challenges of single parenthood. Ethan and Lily have hit it off, bonding over their shared love of building elaborate Lego creations. Watching them play together, I'm reminded of the joy and simplicity of childhood friendships. Last weekend, Jason and I took the kids to a nearby lake for a day of picnicking and swimming. As I watched Ethan splashing in the water, shrieking with laughter as Jason pretended to be a sea monster, I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't romance or attraction, just a sense of contentment and possibility. Looking back, I'm grateful for the difficult experience with Mark because it taught me valuable lessons about self-worth and the importance of protecting my son. I'm more confident now in my ability to navigate complex situations and make tough decisions. Ethan and I are in a good place. We're happy, healthy, and looking forward to whatever the future holds. I'm not ruling out the possibility of finding love again someday, but for now, I'm content with the love I share with my amazing little boy. As I write this, Ethan is curled up next to me on the couch, reading his favorite dinosaur book for the 100th time. He looks up at me with a smile that melts my heart and asks, "Mommy, can we have pancakes for dinner?" And in that moment, I know that everything is exactly as it should be. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. Your support has meant the world to us.